Hello, friends. I'm Jonathan Pishner with Apex Counseling, and I had a conversation yesterday that I thought would be valuable for an awful lot of people. So I decided to bring that conversation here into the video world. So, being a caregiver is hard. If you've ever had to be a caregiver for a loved one, or a family member, a spouse, a friend, even if you're a professional caregiver, such as someone who is in nursing, hospice, a counselor, a therapist, uh, being a caregiver can be tough. And there are a few things about being a better caregiver without falling apart that are important to know because not a lot of people know how to do this, especially if you're in a position where caregiving really gets wrapped into a lot of areas of your life. It's one thing if it's your 20 to 40-hour week job and you're allowed to go home. But for a lot of people, they're not in that position, especially if you have to be a caregiver to a spouse or a family member or a friend. So I want to talk to you today about some ways to approach that are more likely to result in you being a better caregiver and more likely to result in you not feeling like you're falling apart all the time. So when I was having this conversation the other day, the thing that I said that was very helpful, and I've brought this to a number of clients and a number of other people who have had to be caregivers, is there's a certain approach that's more useful than just doing a bunch of stuff and hoping for the best. The first part involves giving up the myth of invincibility. So many of us believe that we should just be able to do an infinite amount of mental and emotional work and be completely fine. And as long as you want to hold on to that belief, you are going to end up wrecking yourself over and over and over and over again. The simple fact is that we have a finite amount of resources, mental, emotional, physical. And once we overexpend those resources, we are going to feel terrible. So, if we can agree that's true, the framework that I oftentimes tell people to think about is even though we can't really do this in a fully objective way, you can actually think of it in that way so that you can manage your resources better. And here's what I work with people on. I help them approach it as a math problem. Now, something as subjective as emotional, mental resources, you can't do that fully, but you can certainly come close. So, when I was talking the other day, what we talked about was let's imagine that you could actually measure emotional units. And when you are a caregiver, you're expending however many emotional units per day on that. So let's make up some numbers and say, okay, you're expending 700 emotional units per day. And most people know that they need to do things to fill themselves up. And the question that I got asked that really brought all of this to a head was, well, I'm doing what I should be. I'm eating right and I'm exercising and I'm sleeping right. I'm doing my best to sleep right. And I said, great. So you're expending 700 emotional units. And from that, you're getting back what, like 150 or 200 of our made up emotional units? You're still clearly at a deficit. So that means there's only two options. You have to either find things that help you recover your emotional units much better, or you have to find ways to expend fewer of them. That's it. And the cool thing I like about treating this as a math problem is because it really then crystallizes what are the options, because that's the only two options. If we have a limited amount of resources, whether that's money resources or food or whatever, as soon as we're able to put some sort of objectivity on it, the resource question becomes clear. Either get more or expend less, and that is it. Now, a lot of people are in a position, if they're a caregiver, where they might still not be able to do what's ideal. Because what's ideal would be that you would be able to be recovering more emotional resources than you are expending. That's the ideal. Not everybody's lucky enough to be in that position. And if you're not, it's fine. What we would then focus on is, well, okay, if daily you're at minus 1,000 emotional units, can we somehow get you to minus 200? can we manage to make it all the way to zero, like you expend just as much as you bring in? Uh, so even when it's not ideal, a lot of times there's many, many, many options. And so when I was having this conversation the other day, it really became about two things. Number one, are there things you could be doing that would help you recover more? Clearly, exercise and sleep were important, but was there anything else? Oh, you've given up your hobbies? Is there one of them you can add back in? Like, I know your time's limited, but can you add one of those back in and recover more emotional units that way? Uh, the answer turned out to be probably. And on the other side, well, okay, you're expending so much. Is there some part of this caregiving that you can give up, either by outsourcing it to somebody else, by somehow writing a check and making that part of the caregiving go away? Is there anything you can do to like get a piece of it back? There were numerous options for that. So within the space of a little bit, we started figuring out, oh, there are options for you to expend fewer emotional units. Matter of fact, here's a great one. For people who are caregivers for persons with dementia. I end up talking to a lot of people about that. Well, sadly, a lot of people accidentally fall into the dynamic of trying to remind people with dementia of things that they should remember. Hopefully that didn't come through. I've smacked my mic. And that takes up a ton of emotional units when they're not going to remember anyway. Reminding people with dementia of things that you think they should know, but they're never going to remember anyhow, is a great way to expend emotional units on a completely pointless task. And so that was one of our big things we talked about, was stop expending emotional units on that, and you'll end up with more at the end of the day. So the point of this whole thing is to find a way to frame this problem that makes the options, if not easy, at least simple. Because whenever you're a caregiver and you're overexpending your emotional energy, the options really are simple. You have to either recover your emotional energy better, faster, and more efficiently, or you have to expend less emotional energy. Those are the two options. Within those, there's many, many, many things that can be done. Whether that's outsourcing, getting more help, getting more support for yourself, getting into therapy. A ton of people just use therapy to like keep themselves together as a caregiver. That's fine. Or finding ways to get more resources. Make sure to engage with your hobbies, especially the ones that make you feel great. Take breaks, get sleep, get exercise. Fill your body with at least something hopefully nutritious and not something you got from the drive-through. So lots of options, but when people start approaching it in this way, and even though we can't really put math to it, if you just kind of imagine putting math to it, that seems to help get people in the right mindset for being a better caregiver and being able to make choices that at least will put them in a better position. Even if you can't get to a net positive on getting your emotional and mental resources back, being at minus 100 emotional units is so much better than at being at minus 1,000. So since that reframe was helpful to that person, I wanted to share that with you today. Hopefully it's helpful to a few people watching this video. Thank you so much for hanging out with me for a few minutes today. I'm Jonathan Pishin with Apex Counseling, and I will see you next time.